I used to think morning routines were a scam. You know, that influencer nonsense about lemon water, gratitude journaling, and waking up at 4 a.m. I'm a regular guy. I used to roll out of bed at 8:15, scroll my phone for 20 minutes, and barely make it to work on time. But a few months ago, I hit a wall. I was exhausted all the time, foggy-headed, snapping at people for no reason. My girlfriend at the time, Emma, kept saying, "You're not yourself lately." I brushed it off, figured it was just work stress. Then one random Tuesday, I woke up before my alarm, like 6 a.m. early. I couldn't fall back asleep, so I decided to make coffee and maybe get a head start on emails. I walked into the kitchen, and that's when I noticed something odd. Emma's phone was lighting up on the counter. A message preview popped up. It said, "You awake yet? Can't stop thinking about last night." My stomach dropped. At first, I thought, maybe it's a joke. Or maybe it was from one of her friends. They have a weird sense of humor sometimes. But then another text came through. "He's probably still asleep. You're safe." That one hit different. I stood there, half awake, heart pounding, trying to decide if I should look. I wish I could say I didn't. But I did. And that's how my 6 things to do before 10 a.m. journey started. Not with a productivity hack, but with a gut punch at sunrise. I didn't even have to scroll far. Just the first few messages were enough to make my hands shake. There were timestamps: midnight, 1 a.m., 2 a.m., all while she told me she was at her friend's girls' night. The guy's name was Eli, work Jim, which I recognized because she'd mentioned him before. She said he was the quiet one who never talks to anyone. Yeah, apparently he'd found his voice. I sat down at the kitchen table, just staring at the phone. My coffee went cold. I tried to think logically, to breathe, but my mind was spinning. Was this real? Was I overreacting? Could there be some weird explanation? When Emma walked in a few minutes later, still in her pajamas, hair a mess, rubbing her eyes, she froze when she saw her phone in my hand. She didn't even ask what I was doing. She just whispered, "Oh no." That's when it hit me. There was no misunderstanding. I asked her point blank, "Who's Eli?" Silence. Then tears. Then excuses. She said it just happened, that she wasn't happy, that it didn't mean anything. You know, the standard script. I'd heard stories like this on Reddit before. Never thought I'd be living one. I told her I needed space. Grabbed my keys, got in the car, and just drove. No destination, just away. But as I drove, something unexpected happened. Instead of spiraling, I felt this weird clarity, like the fog that had been suffocating me for months finally lifted. And that's when I made a decision. I was going to rebuild my mornings and my life from scratch. That first morning after she left was brutal. The silence in the apartment was deafening. No sound of her brushing her teeth, no coffee brewing, no music playing from her Bluetooth speaker. Just me, sitting on the edge of the bed, staring at the floor. I barely slept that night. My chest felt tight, like someone had placed a weight on it. I kept replaying everything, every text, every conversation where she said she loved me, every little lie I must have missed. At 6:30 a.m., I gave up on trying to rest. I got up, made a cup of black coffee, and went to the balcony. It was cold, the kind of morning chill that makes you feel awake in the worst way. I don't know what came over me, but I opened my notes app and typed 6 things to do before 10 a.m. to feel like a human again. It wasn't some grand self-help idea. It was survival, a way to stop myself from sitting there wallowing. I wrote the first 6 things that came to mind. Move my body, even if it's just a walk. Eat something green. I'd been living on pizza and stress. No phone until 9 a.m., especially no stalking her socials. Cold shower. Reset the system. Write something. Anything. Do one thing for future me. It sounded dumb at first, like something you'd see on a Pinterest board. But I figured, what did I have to lose? So that's what I did. I went for a jog, the first in months, and nearly threw up halfway through. But when I came back, heart pounding, sweat dripping, I felt alive. It wasn't happiness, but it was energy. Real, raw, unfiltered energy. And it was the first hint that maybe, just maybe, I could rebuild from this. The next few mornings were unpredictable, like the universe was testing how serious I was about this new life thing. On day 2, I woke up early again, but this time to the sound of a loud bang. My downstairs neighbor, an older lady named Marcy, had dropped her groceries all over the hallway. I rushed down in sweatpants to help her pick them up. Turned out she'd slipped on a patch of spilled milk. While I was helping her, she looked at me and said, "You look tired, sweetheart. Drink some water before you collapse." That hit me harder than I expected. I realized I hadn't had a single glass of water in maybe 2 days, so I added hydrate first thing to my list. Day 3, I went for a jog again, but it started raining halfway through. I ducked under a bus stop shelter, dripping wet, and met this random guy, Tom, who was also taking cover. He was in his 50s, bald, wearing a faded Boston Marathon 2014 shirt. We started talking, and somehow, he ended up giving me life advice. He said, "You can't control what people do to you. You can only control what you do next." It sounded cliché, but coming from a stranger in the rain, it felt profound. Day 4, I decided to hit the gym before work. That's when I ran into, you guessed it, Eli, the guy from Emma's texts. He froze when he saw me, like he'd seen a ghost. I could feel my pulse in my neck, my hands shaking. For a second, I thought I might swing, but I didn't. I just looked at him, nodded once, and walked past. I don't know what possessed me to stay calm. Maybe it was the run. Maybe it was the water. Maybe I was just too tired to keep being angry. Either way, that was the morning I realized something. Discipline gives you power. It wasn't about productivity anymore. It was about control over myself, my reactions, and my damn mornings. By the end of that first week, I'd turned my 6 things into a ritual. It wasn't perfect. Some mornings I still woke up groggy or wanted to check Emma's Instagram, but it was structure. Something steady in the chaos. And the weirdest things started happening. The rest of my day began falling into place. On day 7, I actually arrived at work early, first time in months. My boss, who's usually too buried in spreadsheets to notice anyone, looked up and said, "Morning, early bird. You okay?" I just laughed and said, "Trying something new." That day, I was sharper. I powered through projects that had been dragging for weeks. I wasn't chugging coffee or zoning out in meetings. It felt like someone had flipped a switch in my brain. But here's where it gets unexpected. That afternoon, I got an email from a company I'd applied to months ago and forgotten about. They wanted to schedule an interview. Same day, in 2 hours. Old me would have panicked, probably made an excuse and rescheduled. But new me? I said yes. I took my notes from that morning's writing session, where I'd literally journaled about wanting a fresh start, and used them as talking points. It wasn't planned, but somehow it worked. They called back the next morning to say I got the job. And here's the part that still gives me chills. When I checked the timestamp of their first email, it had come in exactly at 9:59 a.m., 1 minute before the end of my 6 things before 10 a.m. routine. Coincidence? Maybe. But it felt like the universe was saying, keep going. The new job started 2 weeks later, and for the first time in forever, I was excited to wake up. I had purpose again. My 6 things before 10 a.m. weren't just a routine anymore. They were my reset button. Every morning, I'd jog, hydrate, eat something green, take a freezing shower that made me curse life, write a page or 2 in my journal, and then do one small thing to make future me's life easier. Pack lunch, lay out clothes, respond to 1 email early. It sounds simple, but those things built momentum. And then came the test. It was a Friday morning. I'd finished my run, grabbed a smoothie, and was heading into work feeling unstoppable until I saw her. Emma. She was sitting outside a coffee shop near the office, alone, scrolling her phone. My stomach dropped like I'd hit a sudden drop on a roller coaster. I could have walked past and pretended not to see her, but something made me stop. She looked up. Our eyes met. She gave this soft, almost embarrassed smile. "Hey," she said. We talked, awkwardly at first. She told me she'd moved out of the place we shared, that she was figuring herself out. I told her I'd started a new job. She said she was proud of me. Then she asked, "Do you ever think about us?" I didn't answer right away. A few months ago, I probably would have broken down, begged for closure. But standing there in my sweat-soaked running clothes, heart steady, mind clear, I realized I already had closure. I said, "Yeah, but I think about who I was more than who we were." Her eyes watered a little. She nodded. Then she said goodbye, and just like that, she walked away. I didn't feel angry or sad, just done, like I'd finally closed a chapter. When I looked at the time, it was 9:42 a.m. I'd finished all 6 things, including the hardest one, doing something for future me. After that morning with Emma, something shifted in me. It wasn't dramatic, no fireworks, no sudden euphoria, just this quiet sense of peace. Like I'd finally stopped fighting the current. My routine stayed the same, but I started changing. My coworkers began noticing first. One of them, Jake, joked, "Dude, did you start microdosing sunlight or something? You're weirdly calm lately." I laughed it off, but he wasn't wrong. I was calmer, focused. My boss started giving me bigger projects, saying I handled pressure well. And when the company hosted a Friday breakfast meeting, I was the one who volunteered to present a new idea, something I never would have done before. It wasn't all smooth, though. One morning, my alarm didn't go off. My phone had updated overnight, and I woke up at 8:45 instead of 6:30. I panicked, total meltdown mode for about 30 seconds. Before I remembered, the point wasn't perfection, it was consistency. So I adapted. Took a cold shower anyway. Wrote one quick line in my journal. "You woke up late, but you woke up ready." And did a 5-minute jog instead of the full loop. That day ended up being one of my most productive yet. Then came the weirdest surprise of all. Marcy, the elderly neighbor I'd helped weeks ago, knocked on my door with a plate of muffins. "You saved me that day, you know," she said. "I was embarrassed and hurting, and you just helped. No judgment." We talked for a while, and I learned she'd lost her husband last year. She said mornings were the hardest. So, we made a deal. I'd bring her coffee once a week before work. She'd give me one of her baked experiments. That small act became another part of my 10 a.m. ritual, connection, real human connection. And I started realizing, productivity isn't about squeezing more work into the day. It's about squeezing more life into the hours you're already given. A few weeks later, everything I'd built got tested harder than I ever expected. It started on a Thursday. An ordinary morning, cold shower, run, green smoothie, journal, all of it. I felt invincible. Then I got to the office, and before I could even sit down, my boss called me into a meeting room. Apparently, one of our biggest clients had backed out. A 6-figure deal gone. And somehow, because I was the last person to touch the file, everyone was looking at me. My heart started pounding. I knew I hadn't done anything wrong. But when an entire team's eyes are on you, logic doesn't help much. I felt that old panic creeping in, the kind that used to paralyze me before I started all this morning stuff. I excused myself, stepped outside, and sat in my car. I could have just spiraled, but I remembered something from my journal that morning, a line I'd written half awake. No matter what happens today, control your breath before your words. So I did. I took 5 deep breaths, turned my phone off, and just sat there in silence. 10 minutes later, I went back inside. Calm. Steady. We reviewed the files again. Turns out, the client's internal team had made a budgeting error. Nothing to do with me. My boss actually apologized for assuming otherwise. But what hit me wasn't relief. It was how different I'd reacted compared to the old me. No yelling, no blame, no meltdown. Just control. That night, I didn't celebrate. I just sat on my balcony, sipping tea, and realized something. The 6 things before 10 a.m. weren't about success. They were about resilience, building emotional armor for when life inevitably punches you in the face. And life, apparently, wasn't done swinging. Because the next morning, something happened that shook that armor to its core. The next morning started just like the others. Alarm at 6:15, glass of water, shoes laced for my run. It felt like any normal day. But halfway through my jog, my phone started buzzing in my pocket. Unknown number. Normally, I ignore those. But something made me stop and answer. It was Marcy's daughter. Her voice was shaky. She told me that Marcy had passed away in her sleep the night before. Peacefully, she said, "Just didn't wake up." I stood there on the sidewalk, completely frozen. Cars were passing. The sky was pink from the sunrise, and my breath was visible in the cold air. But everything else went silent. I didn't realize how attached I'd gotten to that little old woman until that moment. She'd become this small, steady part of my morning, the human side of my routine. I'd bring her coffee. She'd make me laugh with some sarcastic comment about my rabbit food breakfasts. And now she was just gone. I walked home slowly, the sunrise behind me, my stomach twisted. For the first time in months, I skipped the cold shower. I didn't write, didn't eat. I just sat at my kitchen table and stared at the spot where I used to pack her muffin on Fridays. Part of me wanted to give up the routine completely. What was the point? People still leave. Life still hits hard. But as I sat there, I remembered something she'd said to me the last time I saw her, when I was telling her about my new job. She smiled and said, "Keep waking up early, honey. The world looks kinder before 10 a.m. That hit me like a freight train. So the next morning, I woke up, made 2 cups of coffee, one for me, one for her, and left hers on the balcony railing. Just sat there in silence, watching the steam rise. It wasn't part of the original 6 things, but it became number 7. Remember why you started. After Marcy's passing, I couldn't look at my mornings the same way. They used to be about discipline. Now they were about meaning. Every glass of water, every run, every breath felt heavier, more intentional. So I changed the list. I still had my 6 things, but I rewrote them on a sticky note and taped it above my coffee maker. Move. Because being alive deserves motion. Fuel. Water, greens, or anything that keeps me going. Silence. No screens. Just 5 minutes of real quiet. Shock. Cold shower. Still hate it, still do it. Create. Write, draw, think, but make something. Build. Do one thing for future me, and write under it, in small letters. 7. Remember who helped you wake up. That addition changed everything. I started seeing mornings not as a task list, but as a tribute to every person, every lesson, every scar that brought me here. A week later, at work, something wild happened again. Our marketing director quit suddenly, and upper management asked if I could step in temporarily. I said yes, figuring it'd be short-term. But the crazy part? The ideas I'd been jotting down every morning. All those journal notes, random thoughts, little motivational rants, became the backbone of my first big campaign. It was about restarting, about owning your morning. The campaign went viral. It wasn't meant to be personal, but somehow it was. People resonated with it because it came from something real. And that morning, sitting at my desk at 9:58 a.m., sipping coffee from the mug Marcy gave me, I realized something kind of poetic. All those little, quiet hours before 10 a.m. had built a version of me that I actually liked. Things were starting to feel like they were finally clicking. My mornings, my job, my focus, everything aligned. But life, of course, decided to throw me a curveball. One afternoon, a reporter from a popular lifestyle blog called me. They'd seen the campaign go viral and wanted to do a feature on me, the guy who transformed his mornings and changed his life. I agreed, thinking it would be fun. But during the interview, they asked the one question I wasn't expecting. Do you ever think about your ex? About how she influenced your change? My chest tightened. Part of me wanted to say, yes, and it's complicated, but the other part, the calmer, disciplined part, knew that dragging her name through a story could cause unnecessary drama. Then they pressed further. Some readers say accountability is key. Do you ever regret what she did? I froze. For a moment, my old anger surged. But then I remembered the mornings, the runs, the cold showers, the journal entries. I remembered standing in the rain, talking to Tom, taking control instead of spiraling. I said, regret isn't productive. Pain teaches you what discipline really is, and mornings teach you what to do with that lesson. The reporter nodded, but looked slightly disappointed. I could tell they were hoping for a juicy drama story. After the call ended, I realized this. My routine wasn't just about energy or focus anymore. It was a shield, a compass, and even a moral guide. It helped me navigate life and people with a clarity I didn't have before. And somehow, by protecting myself from cheap drama, I felt freer than I ever had. About a month after the interview, I got an email from a small startup I'd admired for years. They'd been tracking the viral campaign and wanted me to consult on building a morning productivity system for their team. I almost laughed out loud. Me? The guy who used to roll out of bed at 8:15, eyes half closed, coffee in hand, barely awake enough to email my boss. Now people wanted my advice. The catch? They wanted me to start immediately, before 10 a.m., of course. Their idea was that I could lead a 6 things before 10 a.m. session for the entire office. I thought about it. Old me would have said no. Too scared. Too unprepared. Too self-conscious. New me? I said yes. The first day was chaotic. Half the team showed up groggy, grumbling. Some skipped steps entirely. The cold shower demo got a few horrified gasps. But something amazing happened. By 9:45 a.m., they were talking about their mornings, their energy, and how they felt. Real connection. Real focus. One junior designer whispered, I didn't realize mornings could feel alive. That hit me harder than I expected. I realized that my routine, my struggles, my heartbreak, my losses, they weren't just mine anymore. They were tools, stories, lessons that could ripple outward. And for the first time, I felt fully accountable, not just to myself, but to others who were now trusting me to guide them. Just when I thought everything was rolling perfectly, life reminded me that mornings can't solve everything. It was a Wednesday. I'd done my full routine, run, green smoothie, cold shower, journal, all 6 things plus a little extra for future me. I felt unstoppable, confident, ready. Then, about 30 minutes into my first session with the startup team, my laptop froze. Entire presentation gone. All the notes, all the slides, every motivational quote I'd carefully curated, vanished into the digital void. Panic started creeping in. Old me would have frozen, cursed, and walked out. Some part of me even wanted to throw the laptop. But then I felt it, the rhythm of those mornings. The breathing, the discipline, the clarity that came from doing the small things consistently. I remembered the cold shower, the run, the journal. Every morning I'd chosen to show up. I took a deep breath, then another. Then I asked the team to tell me what they remembered from the discussion so far. Piece by piece, we reconstructed the presentation, and in some ways, it was better than the original. More authentic, more interactive. By the end of the session, I was exhausted, but exhilarated. I realized the key lesson. Preparation matters, but resilience matters more. And mornings were the foundation of both. I walked back to my apartment at 9:50 a.m., dripping with sweat and relief, and smiled. I'd survived a meltdown, not because I avoided it, but because I had trained myself to face it. By now, my mornings had become more than a routine. They were a way of life. The 6 things before 10 a.m. weren't just steps on a list. They were a lens for everything else I did. Every setback, every surprise, every emotional punch life threw at me felt smaller, more manageable. I started noticing changes in myself beyond energy and focus. I was calmer with people, more patient, and shockingly, more empathetic. Even small interactions, like chatting with the barista at the coffee shop or giving directions to a lost tourist, carried a sense of purpose I hadn't felt before. One morning, about 6 months in, I was journaling my gratitude list when I realized something. I wasn't thinking about Emma anymore. Not in a spiteful way, not in a I'll never forgive way. I just didn't. My energy wasn't stolen by past heartbreak anymore. My mornings had reclaimed it. And the weirdest, most unexpected bonus? I started dreaming big again. Things I'd shelved for years, a novel I wanted to write, a side business I'd been too scared to start, suddenly felt attainable. The morning ritual had taught me more than productivity. It had taught me, control your small actions, and the big ones fall into place. Pain and chaos are inevitable, but they don't have to define you. Energy, focus, and productivity are nothing without purpose. By 9:55 a.m. each day, I felt ready, not just for work, but for life. Looking back, I barely recognized the guy I was before 6 a.m. became sacred territory. I used to wake up exhausted, reactive, and resentful. Now, mornings are my anchor. They've carried me through heartbreak, grief, career chaos, and embarrassing moments I can barely admit out loud. I learned that discipline isn't about rigid schedules or Instagram-worthy routines. It's about small, intentional acts that give you control when everything else feels out of control. Hydrating, moving, journaling, cold showers, planning for your future self, it's not magic. It's momentum. And momentum builds resilience. Life still throws curveballs. I still face surprises, setbacks, and emotional punches. But I've learned to greet them with energy, focus, and clarity because my mornings taught me how. If you're struggling with heartbreak, burnout, or just the slow grind of life, here's what I'd say. Start small. You don't need a perfect routine. Just one thing consistently before 10 a.m. Be intentional. Every action is a choice. Make them count. Protect your mornings. They're the one part of your day you can fully control. Build resilience, not just productivity. Life isn't predictable, but you can prepare your mind and body for it. Remember why you started. Whether it's for yourself, a lost loved one, or a lesson learned, keep that reason front and center. Keep showing up. Even when you fail, even when it hurts, even when it's messy, showing up is everything. By 10 a.m. each day, I feel alive, focused, ready. And I've realized that if you can own your morning, you can own the rest of your life too.